Jason Mercer thought he had pulled off the perfect crime, a divorce where he kept the millions, the mansion, and the reputation, leaving his wife, Kayla, with absolutely nothing. He mocked her humble origins. He laughed at her blue-collar father. He toasted to his victory with his mistress, convinced he was the smartest man in the room. But Jason forgot one thing. Arrogance blinds you to the truth. He didn't know that the man he called a gardener held the keys to his entire existence. When the truth comes out, it isn't just a divorce, it's an execution. The air inside the Los Angeles County Superior courtroom was stale, recycled, and smelled faintly of floor wax and despair. For Jason Mercer, however, it smelled like victory. He sat at the defendant's table, leaning back in his chair with a calculated nonchalance that bordered on insolence. He adjusted the cuff of his bespoke Brioni suit, glancing at his reflection in the polished mahogany table. At 38, Jason was the picture of corporate aggression, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, hair styled with military precision, and eyes that held the cold, dead shine of a shark circling wounded prey. On the other side of the aisle sat Kayla. She looked small. She wore a simple grey dress that she had owned for 3 years, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She didn't look at him. She hadn't looked at him in months. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Holloway said, peering over his spectacles. "Given the prenuptial agreement signed 5 years ago, and the evidence presented regarding the commingling of assets, or lack thereof, the court rules in favor of the existing contract." Jason felt a surge of dopamine hit his brain. It was better than any drug. He glanced at his lawyer, Preston, a man who charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny. Preston gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "The marital home in Malibu," the judge continued, his voice monotone, "is deemed the sole property of Mr. Mercer, having been purchased through his private trust prior to the marriage. The investment accounts held at Vanguard Holdings remain with Mr. Mercer. Mrs. Mercer is entitled to a lump sum settlement of $25,000, as stipulated in the prenup, intended for relocation expenses. 25,000. It was an insult. It was less than what Jason had spent on his mistress's jewelry last Christmas. Kayla's lawyer, a court-appointed exhausted woman named Mrs. Gable, tried to interject. "Your Honor, my client supported Mr. Mercer through his early years at the firm. She managed the household. The contract is clear, Counselor," Judge Holloway interrupted, slamming the gavel. "Case closed." The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot that signaled the end of Kayla's life as she knew it. Jason stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket. He turned to Kayla, a smirk playing on his lips. "Well," Jason said, his voice smooth and carrying well in the quieting room, "that went better than expected. Don't you think, El?" Kayla slowly stood up. She gathered her thin file of papers. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were brown, deep, and unreadable. There were no tears. That annoyed Jason. He wanted tears. He wanted begging. "I just want my clothes, Jason," she said softly. "I'll have the housekeeper box them up." Jason laughed, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Actually, I'll have them left on the curb. I'm having the locks changed at noon. You know how it is. Security protocol." "You don't have to be cruel," she whispered. Jason stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive musk and mint. "Cruel. Cruel is trapping a man with potential into a mediocre life, Kayla. You were a majestic mistake. I needed a wife for the image, and you fit the bill. For a while. But I'm a partner at Oak Haven Capital now. I need someone who shines, Not someone whose father smells like fertilizer. Kayla flinched. It was the only reaction he got. "Leave my father out of this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Ah, yes. The gardener. The landscaper. Whatever he is." Jason waved a dismissive hand. "Take your 25 grand, Kayla. Go back to Idaho, or wherever that dirt farm is. Buy yourself a nice trailer. You're done here." Jason turned on his heel and walked out of the courtroom, his lawyer trailing behind him like a loyal hound. As he pushed through the double doors into the bright, harsh hallway, Jason pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "It's done," he said, his voice booming. "Total victory. She got crumbs. I kept the bakery. Meet me at Le Sommet in an hour. We're celebrating." He hung up and laughed, the sound echoing off the marble walls. He felt invincible. He had shed the dead weight. He was rich. He was single. And he was the rising star of Los Angeles finance. Nothing could touch him. Le Sommet was the kind of restaurant where the menus didn't have prices, and the waiters judged your shoes before they poured your water. It sat on the 71st floor of the U.S. Bank Tower, offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles, a sprawling grid of smog and ambition. Jason sat at the best table in the house, a corner booth overlooking the helipad. Across from him sat Sienna. Sienna was everything Kayla was not. She was blonde, loud, and dripped in labels. She wore a red Versace dress that was barely legal, and she laughed with her mouth open, showing off veneered teeth that cost more than Kayla's settlement check. "So, she really got nothing?" Sienna asked, her eyes wide as she twirled the stem of her champagne flute. "Like 0? 25 large," Jason chuckled, slicing into a Wagyu ribeye that cost $300. "Basically nothing. It covers her bus ticket home, and maybe a few months of rent in a basement somewhere." Sienna giggled. "You're so bad, Jason. I love it. But wait, didn't you say her dad was going to be a problem? I remember you telling me she threatened to call him." Jason scoffed, taking a long sip of the 1998 Dom Perignon. "Kayla's threats are as empty as her bank account. Her father is a nobody, Sienna. His name is Arthur. He runs some landscaping crew up north, digs holes, plants petunias. I met him once at the wedding. Old guy, calloused hands, wore a suit that looked like he bought it at a thrift store. He didn't say 2 words to me, just stared." "Creepy," Sienna shivered. "Not creepy. Pathetic," Jason corrected. "He looked at me like he was analyzing a bug. I told Kayla back then, your dad needs to stay away from my business associates. I couldn't have a guy with dirt under his fingernails shaking hands with the CEO of Oak Haven Capital." "Well, you don't have to worry about him anymore," Sienna purred, reaching across the table to stroke Jason's hand. "Now it's just us, and the penthouse, and the yacht." "And the yacht," Jason confirmed, his ego swelling. "I'm closing the deal on the Sunseeker next week. Now that I don't have to worry about community property laws, my bonus this quarter is going straight into toys." Jason's phone buzzed on the table. It was an email notification from work. Subject: urgent. Merger update from CEO, Oak Haven Capital. Jason frowned. He tapped the screen. "Jason, I need you in the office first thing tomorrow. The acquisition of the Solara tech firm is hitting a snag. The silent majority shareholder is demanding a sit-down. If we don't close this, the board is going to have our heads. This is the billion-dollar maker, Jason. Don't be late." "Trouble in paradise?" Sienna asked, noticing his expression. "Just business," Jason said, dismissing the email with a swipe. "The Solara deal, the biggest acquisition in the firm's history. I'm the lead negotiator. If I land this, I make senior partner. 7-figure base salary, Sienna. Double the bonuses. You'll crush it," she said. "You always do." "I know." Jason looked out the window at the city below. He felt like a king surveying his kingdom. "I took everything from Kayla because I deserved it. I earned it. She was just baggage." Meanwhile, 30 miles away, the scene was very different. Kayla stood on the curb outside the Malibu mansion she had called home for 5 years. It was raining, a rare, cold drizzle for Southern California. Beside her was a single suitcase and a cardboard box containing her books and a few framed photos. The large oak gates of the driveway were closed. She had tried the code, 1985, her birth year, but it flashed red. He had already changed it. She wasn't crying. She was past the point of tears. She felt a cold, hard knot in her stomach. It wasn't fear anymore. It was clarity. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a cheap burner phone. Jason had cancelled her contract an hour ago, remotely bricking her iPhone. She had bought this one at a convenience store. She dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice. "Hello?" A deep, gravelly voice answered. It sounded like shifting rocks. "Dad," Kayla said. Her voice cracked just a little. There was a pause on the other end. Then the tone shifted from casual to alert. "Ellie, what's wrong? Why are you calling from this number?" "It's over, Dad. The judge ruled. He took everything. He threw me out." Silence. A heavy, dangerous silence stretched across the line. "Did he hurt you?" Arthur's voice was low, terrifyingly calm. "Not physically, but he humiliated me. He mocked you, Dad. He told everyone you were just a dirty gardener. He left me with nothing but a check for $25,000. "I see," Arthur said. The gravel in his voice was grinding now. "And where are you?" "On the curb outside the house. It's raining." "Stay there," Arthur commanded. "I'm sending a car, not a taxi. One of mine. It will be there in 15 minutes. "Dad, I can just get an Uber." "No," Arthur cut her off. "You are done living like a peasant to appease that man's ego. You tried it your way, Ellie. You wanted to marry for love, not money. You wanted to live a normal life without my shadow, and look what he did to you." Kayla gripped the phone tighter. "I know. I was wrong." "He thinks he's won," Arthur said, and for the first time, there was a dark amusement in his voice. "He thinks he's a shark. He has no idea he's been swimming in my tank the whole time." "What are you going to do?" Kayla asked, wiping a raindrop from her nose. "He has a meeting tomorrow, doesn't he? Regarding the Solara Tech acquisition?" Kayla frowned. She knew Jason's schedule better than he did. "Yes, it's his make-or-break deal." "How did you know?" "Because, sweetie," Arthur said, "I own Solara Tech. I bought it 6 months ago through a shell corporation. I was waiting to see how he treated you during the divorce." Kayla's breath hitched. "Go to the hotel the driver takes you to," Arthur said gently. "Get some sleep. Buy a dress. A real one. Tomorrow you're not going to be the ex-wife. You're going to be the boss's daughter. We have a meeting to attend." The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Oakhaven Capitol building, turning it into a pillar of fire. Jason Mercer strode into the lobby at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, wearing a new navy pinstripe suit that cost more than the settlement check he had thrown at his ex-wife the day before. His head pounded slightly from the champagne and the late night with Sienna, but he ignored it. He felt electric. He breezed past the security desk, flashing his badge without breaking stride. "Morning, Mr. Mercer." The guard nodded. "Big day, Jerry." "Big day," Jason called back, stepping into the elevator. He checked his reflection in the mirrored doors. No bags under the eyes. Good. He looked like a closer. When the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor, the atmosphere was frantic. Junior analysts were running around with stacks of files. Phones were ringing, and the smell of nervous sweat was palpable. This was the day of the Solara Tech acquisition. If this deal went through, Oakhaven Capital would own the patent for a revolutionary new battery technology that every electric car manufacturer in the world was desperate for. Jason walked to his corner office, where his assistant, a young woman named Chloe, was frantically typing. "Coffee, black." "2 shots," Jason ordered, throwing his briefcase on the desk. "And get me the final prospectus for Solara. I want to review the numbers one last time before the shareholders arrive." "Mr. Mercer," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "Mr. Winston wants to see you, immediately." Jason paused. Winston was the CEO, a man of few words and even fewer emotions. If he wanted to see Jason before the meeting, it was either very good or very bad. "Relax, Chloe," Jason winked. "He probably just wants to congratulate me and Ad Adams on the divorce. Free man. Clear mind." Jason walked down the hall to the CEO's office. He knocked once and entered. Winston sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single redwood tree. He was a heavy-set man with white hair and eyes like flint. He wasn't smiling. "Sit down, Jason," Winston grunted. Jason sat, keeping his posture relaxed. "Everything ready for the Solara team. I've got the contracts prepped. We're going to lowball them on the initial valuation. Then, forget the valuation," Winston interrupted. "We have a problem. The majority shareholder changed his representation this morning, at 6 a.m. Jason frowned. "Changed representation? Who is it? Goldman? J.P. Morgan?" "No," Winston said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "It's a private holding company called Titanium Ventures. They invoked a clause in the pre-negotiation agreement. They are sending the owner directly. No intermediaries." "So? Let him come," Jason scoffed. "Some tech nerd from Silicon Valley in a hoodie? I'll eat him alive, Winston. I just destroyed my ex-wife's legal team yesterday. I'm in the zone." Winston looked at Jason with a strange expression. "You better be, because this deal is the only thing keeping our Q3 earnings afloat. If Solara walks, our stock tanks. Don't let your arrogance regarding your personal life bleed into this room, Jason." "Personal life is resolved," Jason said coldly. "I cut the dead weight. Today, you're going to see why you pay me the big bucks." While Jason was preparing for battle, Kayla was preparing for a resurrection. She had woken up not in a motel, but in the presidential suite of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. The bed sheets were Egyptian cotton, softer than anything she had slept on in the last 5 years of her marriage. She sat up, looking around the opulent room. Crystal chandeliers, fresh lilies in vases, a breakfast cart waiting with fresh fruit and pastries. It felt like a dream, but the ache in her heart reminded her it was real. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," she said. The door opened, and a stylist walked in, followed by 2 assistants rolling a rack of clothes. Behind them walked her father. Arthur didn't look like the man Jason had mocked. Gone were the flannel shirt and the work boots he wore when he visited the house to play with the dog. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. He wore a watch that cost more than Jason's car, but his face was the same, weathered, kind, but currently set in stone. "Dad," Kayla whispered. She got out of bed and ran to him, hugging him tightly. Arthur held her for a long moment, stroking her hair. "I'm sorry I let it go on this long, Ellie. I wanted to respect your wishes. You wanted to build a life on your own terms. I admired that. But I will not stand by and watch a man treat my daughter like trash." Kayla pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I felt so stupid, Dad. I tried so hard to be the perfect wife. I clipped coupons. I cooked every meal. I supported him when he was just a junior associate. And he looked at me yesterday like I was dirt." He looked at you that way because he is small, Arthur said firmly. And small men need to make others feel smaller to feel big themselves. Today, we remind him of his size. Arthur gestured to the clothes rack. I had my team pull these. Choose whatever you want, but choose something that says power. You are not the victim today, Kayla. You are the heir to the Solara Empire. Kayla looked at the clothes. Chanel, Dior, Alexander McQueen. She ran her fingers over a structured white blazer and pantsuit. It was sharp, professional, and commanding. That one, she said. Good choice, Arthur smiled. Get dressed. The car is downstairs. We have a 10 a.m. meeting to crash. Dad, Kayla paused, holding the blazer. Does he know? About Solara? He knows Solara is the company he wants to buy. Arthur's eyes twinkled with a dangerous light. He doesn't know that Solara is the holding company for my landscaping business. He thinks I plant tulips, Kayla. He forgets that to plant a garden, first you have to dig up the dirt. The conference room at Oakhaven Capital was designed to intimidate. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a dizzying view of Los Angeles. The 4th wall was lined with awards and accolades of the firm's victories. Jason sat at the center of the long table, flanking Winston. On the other side were 3 empty chairs. It was 10:05 a.m. They're late, Jason muttered, tapping his pen on the legal pad. Disrespectful. We should knock 5% off the offer price just for the tardiness. Patience, Winston warned. Jason checked his phone. A text from Sienna. Thinking of you, Tiger. Buy me something pretty when you close the deal. He smirked. He would buy her a car. Why not? Suddenly, the heavy glass doors swung open. The receptionist, Sarah, looked flustered. Mr. Winston. Mr. Mercer. The representatives from Solara are here. Jason stood up, buttoning his jacket, putting on his shark smile. About time. Send them in. A man walked in first. Jason's smile froze. His brain short-circuited. It was Arthur. But it wasn't the Arthur he remembered from the wedding photos or the few brief, awkward encounters. This Arthur commanded the room the second he stepped in. The suit was impeccable. The grooming was precise. The air around him seemed to grow heavier. Jason blinked, confusion washing over him. Why was the gardener here? Did Kayla send him to beg for more money? Here? In the middle of the biggest meeting of the year? Excuse me, Jason barked, his face flushing with anger. This is a private meeting. Security. He looked at the receptionist. Sarah, why did you let him in? This is my ex-father-in-law. He's confused. Jason turned to Arthur, his voice dripping with condescension. Arthur, look. I know you're upset about the divorce, but you can't just walk into a corporate boardroom. We are waiting for the owners of Solara Tech. You need to leave. Now, before I have you arrested for trespassing. Arthur didn't say a word. He didn't even look at Jason. He walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the majority shareholder, and pulled out the chair. You can't sit there, Jason snapped, stepping forward aggressively. Are you deaf? I said get out! Winston, who had been watching Arthur with narrow, calculating eyes, suddenly stood up. His face went pale. Jason, Winston said, his voice sharp. Sit down. What? Winston, this is the gardener I told you about. He's trespassing. Sit down, Winston roared. Jason froze, shocked by his boss's tone. Arthur sat. He placed a thin leather folder on the table. He clasped his hands and finally looked at Jason. I believe, Arthur said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the room effortlessly, that you are waiting for the owner of Solara Tech. I am here. Jason let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. You? You own Solara? You fix sprinklers, Arthur. You own a beat-up truck and live in the middle of nowhere. I own a landscaping company, yes, Arthur said calmly. It's called Terraform Global. We handle environmental restructuring for governments. We reforest deserts. We build dams. And as a hobby, I invest in green energy technology, specifically Solara tech. Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Winston. Winston was nodding slowly, recognizing the name Terraform. It was a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. But, Jason stammered, but Kayla, she worked as a waitress when I met her. She drove a Honda. My daughter, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder, wanted to know that the man she married loved her for who she was, not for what her father could buy. She wanted to build a life with you from the ground up. Arthur leaned forward. She thought you were a builder, Jason. Turns out you're just a demolitionist. This is ridiculous, Jason said, trying to regain his footing, though sweat was starting to prickle on his forehead. Fine, so you have money. Congratulations. That doesn't change the fact that we are here to discuss a business acquisition. Oakhaven is the best buyer for Solara. You know it. Business is business, Arthur. Let's not make this emotional. I agree, a female voice said from the doorway. Let's keep it strictly professional. Jason whipped his head around. Kayla walked in. She was breathtaking. The white suit made her look like a modern-day Valkyrie. Her hair was down, cascading in waves. She wore heels that clicked rhythmically on the floor as she walked toward the table. She didn't look like the defeated woman from the courtroom. She looked like a CEO. She walked past Jason. The scent of her perfume, something expensive, floral and sharp, hit him. She sat next to her father. Kayla, Jason whispered. Mrs. Mercer, she corrected, then paused. Actually, it's Miss Adams now. I'm taking my father's name back. Mercer never really fit. You. Jason pointed a shaking finger. You're part of this. I'm the CFO of Solara Tech, Kayla said smoothly, opening her own folder. I've been managing the remote accounts for years. You just never asked what I did on my laptop while you were watching football, Jason. You assumed I was browsing for recipes. The silence in the room was deafening. Winston looked from Jason to Kayla, realizing the catastrophe that was unfolding. Mr. Mercer, Kayla said, her voice crisp and professional. We have reviewed Oakhaven's initial proposal. To be blunt, it's inadequate. But before we even get to the valuation, there is a matter of due diligence regarding the lead negotiator. She looked Jason dead in the eyes. We have concerns about the ethical standing of the partner in charge. You. Jason felt the collar of his shirt tightening like a noose. He forced a laugh, a desperate, hollow sound. Ethical standing. Jason looked at Winston, pleading for backup. Winston, this is a shakedown. It's a bitter ex-wife trying to leverage a deal to get back at me. It's conflict of interest. Actually, Arthur interjected smoothly, conflict of interest would be if we hid our relationship. We are being very open about it. We simply don't trust your judgment, Jason. And based on the file my daughter has compiled, neither should your boss. Kayla slid a document across the polished table toward Winston. What is this? Winston asked, putting on his reading glasses. That, Kayla said, is a record of the creative accounting Jason used to hide assets during our divorce proceedings. He moved $3 million into offshore accounts in the Caymans under the shell name Blue Horizon. He did this while claiming to the court that his liquidity was tied up in market fluctuations. Jason's face drained of color. That's a lie. That's privileged information. It's not privileged if you used Oakhaven's servers to execute the transfers, Kayla countered. You logged in from your work terminal. IP address 192.168.0.45. Timestamp 11:42 p.m., 3 days before the initial filing. Winston flipped through the pages. His face grew darker with every page flip. "Jason," Winston said, his voice low and dangerous, "did you use firm resources to hide personal assets? You know that exposes Oakhaven to federal auditing. If the SEC sees this—" "It's a fabrication," Jason shouted, standing up. "She hacked me. She's lying." "Sit down, Jason," Arthur commanded. This time, Jason sat. "There's more," Kayla continued, her voice steady, relentless. "The Solara deal. You've been bragging to the board that you can acquire us for 40% below market value because the owner is passive and uneducated. You noted in your internal memo, page 4, paragraph 2, that you intended to strip the company of its patents and liquidate the workforce within 6 months. Kayla looked at her father. "My father spent 30 years building that workforce. They have pensions, they have families, and you plan to fire them all by Christmas to boost your quarterly bonus. That's standard business practice," Jason yelled. "It's restructuring. It's greed," Arthur said, "and it's short-sighted. You see, Jason, you missed the real value of Solara. It's not the patents, it's the engineers. You were going to fire the geese that lay the golden eggs just to sell the feathers." Winston closed the file. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at Jason with pure disgust. "Jason," Winston said, "you told me you had a rapport with the Solara ownership. You told me this was a lock. You didn't tell me you had just dragged the daughter of the owner through a hostile divorce and defrauded the court using my servers." "I can fix this," Jason pleaded. "Winston, look, I can get the price down. We can—" "You can't do anything," Arthur said, "because Solara is not selling to Oakhaven." Jason froze. "What?" "We aren't selling," Arthur repeated. "We came here to tell you that personally. We are going with a competitor. Global Tech Industries offered us a fair price, and they guaranteed the jobs of our workforce." "Global Tech?" Jason gasped. "They're our biggest rivals. If they get the battery tech, Oakhaven becomes obsolete in the energy sector." "Exactly," Kayla said. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "It's called the free market, Jason. Karma is just a market correction." "But—" Jason looked around the room, the walls closing in. "But I have options. I have shares." "About those shares," Arthur said, leaning back. "Since the divorce settlement was finalized yesterday, and you insisted on keeping all your pre-marital assets strictly separate, those assets are yours. But you also insisted that Kayla take a cash settlement instead of stock options. That was a mistake." "Why?" Jason whispered. "Because," Kayla answered. "Solara Tech just filed a patent infringement lawsuit against Oakhaven's current energy holdings. We filed it this morning at 9 a.m. Winston's head snapped up. "You what?" "Oakhaven has been using a derivative of our battery cooling tech for 3 years, Kayla explained. "I knew about it, of course. I noticed the specs in Jason's papers at home. I didn't say anything because I was his wife. I was loyal. But now, I'm just a competitor." "A lawsuit like that," Winston murmured, his face ashen. "That will freeze our assets. Our stock will plummet." "It already has." Arthur checked his watch. "Markets opened 30 minutes ago. News of the lawsuit leaked. Oakhaven stock is down 12%. By lunch it will be 20. Jason pulled out his phone. The screen was filled with red arrows. His portfolio, his millions, his leverage, his entire net worth, which was tied up in company stock, was evaporating before his eyes. "You're ruining me," Jason rasped. He looked at Kayla. "You're destroying the firm. You're destroying me." "No, Jason," Kayla said softly. She stood up, smoothing her white blazer. You did this. You wanted to win. You wanted the total victory. You wanted to leave me with nothing. She leaned over the table, her face inches from his. You wanted a stranger for a wife because you thought I was boring. Well, meet the stranger, Jason. Do I shine enough for you now? Winston stood up. He looked at Jason like he was a dead rat on the carpet. Jason, Winston said, pack your things. You're fired, effective immediately, and don't bother asking for severance. We're going to need that money to fight the SEC when they come knocking about those offshore accounts. Jason sat paralyzed. The room spun. The view of Los Angeles, which had looked like a kingdom an hour ago, now looked like a ledge. Arthur stood up and offered his arm to his daughter. Ready to go, Miss Adams? Ready, Mr. Adams. Kayla smiled. They turned and walked out of the glass room, leaving Jason Mercer sitting alone in the silence of his own making. The walk from the conference room to the elevator was the longest journey of Jason Mercer's life. It wasn't just a walk. It was a parade of humiliation. Winston hadn't just fired him. He had triggered the rogue employee protocol. 2 security guards, burly men who used to nod respectfully at Jason every morning, now flanked him, gripping his elbows. I can walk myself, Jason snapped, trying to shake them off. Company policy, sir, one guard said, his voice void of any deference. Hands where we can see them. They marched him past the bullpen. The news had traveled faster than light. Heads turned. Whispers hissed like steam escaping a pipe. The junior analysts, the ones Jason had terrorized for missed commas or cold coffee, watched with wide, hungry eyes. They weren't sympathetic. They were witnessing a public execution, and they couldn't look away. Chloe, his assistant, stood by her desk holding a cardboard box. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. Here are your personal effects, Mr. Mercer, she said, shoving the box into his chest. It was light. A framed photo of himself, a stress ball, and a fountain pen. Chloe, call my lawyer, Jason demanded, clutching the box. I don't work for you anymore, Jason, she replied, turning back to her screen. And the firm has blocked your number from the internal system. The elevator doors closed, sealing him in with the guards. As the numbers ticked down, 40, 39, 38, Jason's mind raced. He had to mobilize. He had to liquidate before the freeze hit. He burst out of the lobby and into the harsh sunlight of downtown Los Angeles. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers trembling uncontrollably. He dialed his broker. Voicemail. He dialed the offshore banker in the Caymans. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. Arthur wasn't bluffing. The SEC moved fast when a tip came from a multi-billion-dollar entity like Terraform. He needed an ally. He dialed Sienna. Hey, baby, Jason said, forcing a casual tone, though his voice sounded high and thready. Change of plans. Oakhaven is... Well, it's a sinking ship. I got out. I'm thinking we take that trip to Saint-Tropez early. Pack a bag. I'll swing by. There was a pause on the line. Then, the sound of a zipper closing. I saw the news, Jason, Sienna said. Her voice wasn't purring anymore. It was flat, metallic. CNBC is reporting that you're under investigation for embezzlement and insider trading. They're saying Oakhaven stock is in free fall because of you. It's a misunderstanding. I'm going to fix it. I just need access to the joint account I set up for us. I need to transfer... The account is empty, Jason. Jason stopped walking. The sidewalk seemed to tilt. What? I withdrew it an hour ago, Sienna said. Consider it a severance package. You promised me a yacht, remember? Since I'm not getting that, I took the cash. Sienna, that's theft. That's my money. Technically, she laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. It was a gift. You put my name on the account so your wife wouldn't find it. You played yourself, genius. Don't call me. I don't date felons. The line went dead. Jason stood on the corner of 5th and Flower, surrounded by the noise of the city, utterly alone. He checked his banking app. Account status: frozen. Pending litigation. Case number 449-B. Solara Tech versus Mercer. He ran to the parking garage. He needed his car, his Porsche 911 Turbo S. It was his sanctuary. He reached the reserved spot. It was empty. A tow truck was just exiting the ramp, the gleaming black Porsche hooked onto the back. "Hey! Hey!" Jason sprinted after it, his expensive dress shoes slapping against the concrete. "Stop! That's my car!" The tow truck driver didn't stop. He just pointed to a clipboard through the window. "Bank repo order, pal. Payment bounced this morning." Jason watched his car disappear into the traffic. He dropped the cardboard box. The photo frame shattered. He had no car, no job, no access to his millions. His friends were undoubtedly deleting his contact info as he stood there. He patted his pockets. He had his wallet, with $300 in cash and a platinum credit card that was likely already declined. He had to go home, the Malibu house. The judge gave it to him. It was his fortress. He hailed a taxi, an indignity in itself, and gave the driver the address. The ride took an hour. When they pulled up to the heavy iron gates of the Malibu estate, Jason's heart sank into his stomach. There was a chain around the gate. A large orange sticker was plastered on the intercom box. Property seized, U.S. Department of Justice evidence lockdown. 2 federal agents were standing by the front door, cataloging items. They were carrying out paintings. His paintings. Jason slumped back in the taxi seat. The driver looked at him in the rearview mirror. "This is the spot, buddy. That'll be $80. Jason handed him a $100 bill, one of the last 3 he owned. "Keep driving," he whispered. "Where to?" "I don't know," Jason said, staring at the mansion he had fought so hard to keep from Kayla. "Just away from here." As the taxi pulled away, Jason's phone buzzed with a notification from a news app. Breaking. Kayla Adams, CFO of Solara Tech, announces new clean energy initiative for Los Angeles. Stock soars. Below the headline was a picture. It was Kayla standing at a podium, looking radiant and powerful. Beside her stood Arthur, looking proud. They were holding hands. Jason threw his phone out the window. It shattered on the asphalt, just another piece of debris in the wreckage of his life. 6 months had passed since the glass walls of Oakhaven Capital shattered around Jason Mercer. In the relentless churning of the news cycle, the scandal of his firing and the subsequent SEC investigation had already been relegated to the back pages of the business journals, replaced by newer, louder failures. But for Jason, the collapse was not a headline. It was his every waking moment. The setting for his latest humiliation was the Ritz-Carlton, a place where he had once commanded the best tables and tipped the staff with $100 bills without glancing at the denomination. Tonight, the hotel was hosting the Green Future Initiative Gala, the most exclusive event of the season. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a living sanctuary, a testament to sustainable luxury. Cascading vines of ivy draped from the balconies and centerpieces of living white orchids bloomed on every table. The air smelled of jasmine and money, old money, new money, and clean money. Kayla Adams stood near the edge of the stage, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that seemed to shimmer like forest leaves under the lights. It was structured yet flowing, a stark contrast to the rigid, stifling clothes Jason had always insisted she wear. Her hair was loose, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, and for the first time in years, The tension that used to live permanently between her brows was gone. She wasn't just attending the gala. She was the reason it existed. "You're checking your watch," Arthur's voice came from beside her. He appeared holding 2 small plates of hors d'oeuvres, looking dashing in a tuxedo that fit his broad frame perfectly. He looked less like a landscaper tonight, and more like the titan of industry he had always quietly been. Kayla smiled, taking a plate. "Old habits, I guess. I still feel like I'm running on someone else's schedule. Like I'm going to be late for something I didn't want to go to in the first place." "Those days are over, Ellie," Arthur said softly, his eyes scanning the room with a protective warmth. "Look at them. They aren't here for the free champagne. They're here because they believe in what you've built. The solar grid project is going to save the city millions, and it's going to create thousands of jobs. You did that." "We did that," she corrected gently. "I just signed the checks," Arthur chuckled, biting into a tart. "You did the work. You navigated the zoning laws. You handled the press. You charmed the city council. You're a natural, sweetie. I should have handed the reins over years ago." Kayla looked out at the sea of faces, politicians, tech moguls, celebrities. "I think I needed to go through the fire first, Dad. I needed to know what it felt like to be nothing so I could appreciate being something." Arthur's expression darkened slightly. "Speaking of nothing, I saw Winston earlier near the bar." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Winston? Jason's old boss? The man who wouldn't look me in the eye for 5 years because he thought I was generic wife material?" "The very same," Arthur nodded grimly. Oakhaven collapsed after the patent lawsuit. The SEC fines bled them dry. Winston managed to avoid prison, but just barely. He's consulting now, which is corporate speak for begging for scraps. He asked if he could get 5 minutes with you. To do what? Apologize, perhaps, or ask for a job. He knows Solara is hiring. Kayla let out a short, incredulous laugh. Karma really does have a sense of humor. "It's not just humor, Ellie. It's gravity," Arthur said. "What goes up without a foundation must come down." He gestured toward the open glass doors that led to the terrace. Beyond the velvet ropes and the red carpet, the valet stand was a hive of activity. Expensive cars were rolling up in a continuous stream. Ferraris, Bentleys, custom Teslas. "Don't look now," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "But I think our car is here, and I think you should see who is parking it." Kayla turned slowly. Outside, the night air was crisp. The valet team was swarming the entrance, running back and forth in their red vests. They moved with a frantic energy, trying to keep up with the demands of the elite guests. One valet was slower than the others. He moved with a heavy, trudging gait, as if gravity pulled on him harder than anyone else. He was older than the college kids working the line. His hair, once the subject of weekly appointments at the city's most expensive salon, was graying at the temples and overdue for a cut. A scruffy, uneven beard covered the jawline that he used to admire in the mirror every morning. It was Jason. Kayla felt the world tilt on its axis for a second. The man who had mocked her for counting coupons, who had laughed at her father's dirt farm, was now jogging to open the door of a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The driver of the Rolls was a young tech CEO, maybe 25 years old, wearing sneakers with his tuxedo. He looked exactly like Jason had looked 10 years ago, arrogant, fast, and untouchable. "Careful with the paint, buddy," the young CEO snapped as he stepped out, tossing the heavy fob through the air without looking. "That custom finish cost more than your life." Jason fumbled the catch but managed to grab the keys before they hit the pavement. He didn't snap back. He didn't deliver a witty, cutting retort. He didn't smirk. He just looked at his shoes. Cheap, black, rubber-soled shoes. "Yes, sir," Jason mumbled, his voice a hollow shell of its former boom. "Enjoy your evening. Make sure it's up front when I come out," the kid barked, already walking away, not sparing Jason a single glance. To him, Jason was just furniture, a mechanism to move a car. Kayla watched the scene unfold with a strange detachment. She waited for the anger to rise. She waited for the vindictive triumph, the urge to march out there and laugh in his face, to wave her diamond bracelet and show him exactly what he had thrown away. But the anger didn't come. Instead, she felt a profound, quiet stillness. It wasn't pity. He didn't deserve pity, but it was a release. The monster in her memory shrunk down until he was just a sad, tired man in a polyester vest. "Do you want to go say hello?" Arthur asked, watching her face closely. "We could request him specifically to park the car. Maybe tip him a nickel. Rub it in a little." Kayla shook her head slowly. She took a sip of her water, the bubbles crisp on her tongue. "No, Dad," she said. "The best revenge isn't making him suffer. He's doing a fine job of that himself. The best revenge is him realizing that I'm happy, that I'm whole, and that I didn't need him for any of it." She turned her back on the glass doors, facing the ballroom filled with light, music, and people who respected her for her mind, not her husband. "Besides," she smiled, smoothing the silk of her dress, "I have a speech to give, and I don't want to be late." Outside, inside the leather cocoon of the Rolls-Royce, Jason Mercer paused. Through the windshield, past the valet stand and the security guards, he could see through the open glass doors of the ballroom. He saw the emerald dress. He saw the way the light caught her hair. He saw her laughing at something Arthur said, a genuine, head-thrown-back laugh he hadn't heard in years because he had never given her a reason to use it. For a second, their eyes seemed to meet across the distance, the queen in her castle and the peasant at the gate. Jason felt a lump in his throat that was hard, jagged, and tasted like ash. He remembered the courtroom, the smell of floor wax, his own voice echoing, "Go back to the dirt farm." He looked at his hands gripping the steering wheel. They were rough now, chapped from the wind and the cold. He worked 2 jobs to pay for a studio apartment in the valley that smelled of damp carpet. He had no friends. His phone never rang. Sienna had married a hedge fund manager last week. He had seen the photos in a discarded magazine in the break room. He looked back at the ballroom, desperate for one more glimpse, one more acknowledgement, even if it was a look of hatred. Anything to prove he still existed in her world. But Kayla had already turned away. She was walking toward the stage, her head held high, disappearing into the light. She wasn't looking at him. She would never look at him again. "Hey, Mercer, move the car!" the valet manager shouted, banging his fist on the window, startling Jason. "We got a line backed up to Wilshire. Move it or you're fired!" Jason flinched, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I'm going," he muttered, his voice cracking. "I'm going." He shifted the Rolls-Royce into gear and drove away from the entrance, steering the luxury car toward the dark, concrete corners of the parking garage, leaving the warmth and the light far behind him. Inside the ballroom, the lights dimmed. A spotlight cut through the darkness, finding Kayla as she stepped up to the microphone. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, rich and celebratory. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the architect of our city's new dawn, the CEO of Solara Tech, Ms. Kayla Adams." Thunderous applause erupted, filling the room, shaking the floorboards, and drowning out the distant sound of a car engine fading into the night. Kayla took a breath, smiled at her father in the front row, and began to speak. Jason Mercer spent his life climbing a ladder, stepping on anyone who got in his way, convinced that the view from the top was the only thing that mattered. He mistook kindness for weakness and silence for submission. He never understood that the people he called dirt were actually the soil, the foundation that held everything up. When he tried to bury Kayla and her father, he forgot the most important rule of nature. When you bury seeds, they grow. In the end, Jason didn't just lose his money, he lost his dignity, his legacy, and the only woman who had ever truly loved him. He was left with the ashes of his ego, while the wife he discarded turned into gold. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate karma and justice, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Did Jason deserve his fate, or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.